12-year-old Miguel stood backstage at one of the world's biggest talent shows, his small hands tightly gripping a worn-out photo of his father. The lights were blinding, the crowd's murmurs thunderous even through the thick curtains, and the pressure so heavy it nearly crushed the little confidence he had. But he didn't come all this way to back out now. Miguel was born in the narrow alleys of Tanda, Manila, where the streets smelled of diesel and dreams seemed as distant as the stars. His father, a janitor by day and a passionate guitarist by night, had introduced him to music. They didn't have much, often just rice and salt for dinner, but the sound of his father's guitar filled their tiny home with warmth. Every night, Miguel would rest his head on his father's lap as he played old English songs, humming melodies until both drifted to sleep. But those nights ended too soon. When Miguel was 9, his father fell ill. The hospitals turned them away for lack of money. And before Miguel truly understood the finality of death, his father was gone. His mother, already frail and overworked, became both his rock and his responsibility. Miguel began singing on busy streets and jeepneys, hoping for a few coins from kind strangers. His favorite song to sing was Hotel California. It was his father's favorite too. Despite their struggle, Miguel never stopped singing. He didn't have a vocal coach, no expensive mic, not even proper shoes some days. But he had heart and the memory of his father in every note. One day, a video of Miguel singing went viral. A tourist had filmed him outside a cafe in Manila. The boy's voice, raw and soulful, pierced through the noise of traffic and made thousands stop scrolling. Within days, an international talent show reached out. They offered him a flight, a chance to audition, and maybe, a future. Now, backstage, Miguel's chest pounded. His mother sat quietly nearby, holding back tears. She had sewn his audition outfit from old clothes, trying to make him look like the star she believed he was. Miguel kissed the photo of his father, closed his eyes, and whispered, "This one's for you, Papa." Then he walked toward the light. As the curtain rose, Miguel stepped onto the grand stage. Towering cameras surrounded him, judges sat poised with pens and polite smiles, and the audience leaned in with curiosity. He looked so small, almost fragile, beneath the giant spotlights. A judge asked for his name, and he answered softly, "Miguel. I'm from the Philippines." Another judge asked what he'd be performing. "Hotel California," he said. The crowd murmured. A risky choice, some thought. A legendary song, hard to pull off. Miguel gripped the microphone, took a shaky breath, and began. The first note was soft but rich, echoing with emotion. The audience quieted instantly. He sang not with the polish of a trained star but with the ache of someone who had lived every word. As his voice rose and fell through the haunting verses, it carried something rare, sincerity. The judges exchanged looks, one biting her lip, another blinking faster than usual. Miguel wasn't just performing. He was telling a story, his story, through the lyrics. Every note felt like a conversation with someone he had lost. By the time he hit the chorus, the room was utterly still. The usual chatter, the whispers, even the faint hum of light seemed to pause. A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. A judge leaned forward, visibly moved. As the final chords faded, Miguel lowered the mic and looked out, heart racing. There was no applause at first, just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Full of awe. Of respect. Of something deeper than clapping could express. Finally, one judge stood up, voice cracking slightly. "Miguel, who taught you to sing like that?" she asked. He hesitated. Then replied, "No one. I just sing when I miss my dad." Another judge turned away, clearly trying to hide his tears. The crowd erupted in applause. People stood up, cheering, many still with tears in their eyes. And then, it happened. One of the judges, stern and rarely impressed, slammed the golden buzzer. In a flash, gold confetti exploded from the ceiling. It floated down like a slow-motion dream. Miguel covered his mouth in disbelief, then burst into tears. He looked to his mother, who had rushed to the edge of the stage, her hands trembling. The judges ran up to hug him. "That was the most heartfelt performance I've ever witnessed," one said. Another added, "You didn't just sing that song, you healed something in all of us." Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. But amid all the excitement, a quiet moment unfolded. A producer approached Miguel and his mother. He knelt in front of them, his voice gentle. "My wife and I saw your video weeks ago. Tonight confirmed what we already felt. We'd like to sponsor Miguel's education. Music school. Anything he needs. We want to help." Miguel looked up in shock. His mother clutched her chest, overwhelmed. "But, why?" she asked. The producer smiled. "Because sometimes, one voice can remind the world what love sounds like. Your son has that voice." Miguel didn't know what the future held. But at that moment, surrounded by confetti, applause, and strangers who believed in him, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the cameras turned off, Miguel sat in a quiet corner, still in his handmade outfit. He pulled out the photo of his father and whispered, "We did it, Papa." The stars outside the studio twinkled a little brighter that night, as if the heavens themselves had been listening. Sometimes, it's not the range or the rhythm that makes a voice unforgettable. It's the pain behind it. The love that shapes it. And sometimes, a boy from the slums of Manila can sing a song that reaches hearts across oceans. And reminds the world that even in loss, there can be beauty. Miguel stood alone beneath the blinding lights, his tiny frame almost swallowed by the vastness of the stage. The room buzzed with anticipation, but he couldn't hear it anymore. His heart thudded loud in his chest, and the microphone felt cold and heavy in his hand. Across from him, the judges sat poised, smiles courteous but cautious, the kind they wore for every young hopeful who stepped onto that stage. One of them leaned forward slightly. "Whenever you're ready." Miguel nodded once. Then he closed his eyes. The music began, those haunting, unforgettable opening chords of Hotel California. For a moment, he stood motionless. And then, he sang. His voice wasn't loud or flashy. It was something else entirely, low, aching, and soaked in emotion. It wrapped around every word like a whispered secret, and suddenly the audience wasn't watching a 12-year-old boy anymore. They were listening to a soul that had lived and lost and remembered. The polite expressions on the judges' faces began to shift. One blinked, confused by the lump rising in her throat. Another sat back, arms folded, trying to remain professional but visibly affected. The sternest judge, who rarely smiled and never cried, brought a trembling hand to her chest. She wasn't hearing a performance, she was feeling a memory she didn't even know she had. Miguel didn't just hit the notes, he carried them, like fragile things too precious to drop. As he reached the chorus, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The spotlight glistened off the tears forming in his eyes, and in that moment, his voice cracked ever so slightly, just enough to make every heart in the room crack, too. The crowd was frozen. You could hear the hum of the lights above, the click of a camera shutter, even the quiet sob of someone in the third row. There was no shifting in seats, no whispering. Just silence. Reverent silence. He sang the final line slowly, delicately, as if letting go of something he had carried for too long. And then, the music stopped. Miguel opened his eyes. He was greeted by absolute stillness. The kind of stillness that only comes after something sacred. And then it began, soft at first. A gasp. Then applause. Then a wave of cheers that shook the room. People rose from their seats, clapping through tears. Grown men wiped their eyes. A woman near the front whispered, "That little boy, he broke my heart open." The judges stood. One of them, her voice thick with emotion, said, "Miguel? I don't have words. You just made me remember things I thought I'd buried." That wasn't a performance. That was healing. Another judge leaned toward the mic. "You sang that like you'd lived every single lyric. Where does that come from?" Miguel looked down at the floor, then slowly up at the sea of faces watching him. He cleared his throat. "I sing when I miss my dad," he said softly. The room erupted again, but this time with a different kind of sound, a collective sob, a shared ache. It was as if, through his voice, Miguel had pulled everyone's grief into the light and made it feel okay to cry. In that moment, it didn't matter where he came from, how old he was, or that his shoes didn't match. He had done what few could do. He made the world feel. As the final note drifted into silence, Miguel stood frozen on stage. His small shoulders rose and fell with each shaky breath, the microphone still trembling in his hand. But the sound that followed wasn't what most singers might expect. There was no instant applause, no whoops or whistles. Just silence. A deep, overwhelming silence that filled the massive theater like a sacred pause. Thousands of people sat perfectly still, awed, suspended in a moment too fragile to break. Even the judges remained motionless, eyes locked on the boy who had just poured his heart out through a classic rock song that now somehow belonged to him. The light seemed softer now, golden and almost reverent. Miguel blinked, unsure. Had he done something wrong? Then slowly, one of the judges rose to her feet. Her eyes glistened. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Who taught you to sing like that?" Miguel looked down at his worn sneakers. He hesitated, then lifted his head with quiet strength. "No one," he said softly. "I just sing when I miss my dad." The words struck like lightning. In the second judge's eyes, the tears began to fall quietly at first, then freely. He didn't even try to hide it. His voice cracked as he leaned into the mic. "That was the most heartfelt performance I've ever witnessed. Ever. You didn't just sing that song, you lived it." A stunned hush returned, more powerful than before. And then... slam! The loud clang of the golden buzzer echoed through the hall like thunder. For a split second, Miguel didn't react, he didn't understand. But then came the sound of confetti cannons firing, and suddenly the air filled with shimmering gold. It floated down in slow, magical waves. Miguel's eyes widened. His hands shot to his face as the tears spilled over. He dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. The moment had become too big for him to hold. He sobbed, not just from joy, but from release. From grief. From everything he had carried in silence until this day. His mother rushed from backstage, tears streaking down her face as she ran into his arms. The crowd rose like a wave, cheering, clapping, shouting his name. Some held their hearts. Others simply cried. The judges stood as one, clapping through their tears. One leaned into the mic once more, voice trembling with emotion. "You've just reminded all of us what music is really for. Not to impress, but to touch." And there, beneath a golden shower of confetti, a barefoot boy from the streets of Manila stood at the center of the world, not just as a singer, but as a symbol of something far more powerful. Hope wrapped in a song. Backstage buzzed with celebration, producers hurrying by with headsets, cameras flashing, crew members hugging one another. But for Miguel, everything had gone quiet again. He sat on a folding chair in the corner, his tiny body wrapped in his mother's arms, gold confetti still tangled in his hair and clinging to his shoulders like stars that didn't want to let go. His cheeks were damp, his hands still trembling, but his heart, it was full in a way he had never known before. People passed by offering congratulations, calling him the boy with the golden soul, or simply wiping their eyes and nodding in gratitude. But Miguel just stared at his lap, dazed, the echoes of the golden buzzer still ringing in his ears. Then, a man in a suit knelt before him. Someone important looking, but with kind eyes and a voice soft enough not to startle. He looked at Miguel, then gently turned to his mother, who was still clutching her son like she couldn't believe this was real. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I know this may be sudden, but my wife and I watched from the control booth tonight. We've seen hundreds of acts, but your son," he glanced at Miguel, voice catching. "He reminded us of everything that truly matters." Miguel looked up, unsure of what the man meant. The producer continued, voice steadier now. "We want to help. Not just tonight. We want to give Miguel a chance. A music school scholarship. A place to stay nearby. A safe home. Support, real support, to build a future. He's already changed so many hearts. Let us help change his life." Miguel stared at him. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, he slowly reached for his mother's hand and held it tight. Her eyes filled with tears, lips trembling in disbelief. "But, why us?" she asked. The man smiled. "Because tonight, your son gave the world something it didn't know it needed. A voice that came from pain, but brought healing. You came here with nothing but love, courage, and a song. And that was everything." Miguel looked down at the floor, tears spilling again, but these were different. Not from sorrow. Not even from joy. They were from the feeling of finally being seen. As he stood, the gold confetti still falling gently from his sleeves, Miguel took one last glance at the stage beyond the curtain. Just hours ago, it had seemed like an impossible dream. Now, it felt like the first open door in a long hallway of possibilities. He didn't know where this new path would lead. But he knew this: he had walked in with only a memory of his father and a song in his heart. And he was walking out with so much more. Dreams rekindled. Hearts changed. And a golden path ahead, paved not just with applause, but with love.